If you play games on PC today, chances are you use Steam. It's basically impossible to avoid. Your friends are on Steam, your games are on Steam, your screenshots, achievements, mods, playtime, it all lives there. And because Steam feels so normal now, most people never stop to think about how weird it actually is. Millions of people willingly accepted a future where games aren't physical anymore, a future where your entire library exists digitally, a future where one launcher controls basically everything. But here's the crazy part. When Steam first appeared, people absolutely hated it. Not slightly disliked. I mean genuine anger. Players thought it was invasive, developers didn't trust it, PC gamers believed Valve was ruining gaming, and honestly, for a while, it really looked like Steam was about to become one of the biggest failures in gaming history. This was the story of how Steam almost became the thing everybody feared. To understand why people hated Steam so much, you have to understand what PC gaming looked like before it existed. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, gaming was physical. You walk into a store, grab a huge game box off the shelf, and inside you get discs, manuals, maps, sometimes even posters. Installing games felt like an event. And most importantly, once you bought the game, it was yours. No accounts, no launchers, no internet requirements, no online activation. You installed the game and played it. Simple. At the time, internet speeds were also terrible for most people. A lot of players still used dial-up internet, so the idea of downloading full games online sounded ridiculous. Why would anyone wait hours, or even days, to download something they could just buy in a store? That's the environment Steam entered, and Valve completely underestimated how much players would resist change. Valve originally created Steam in 2003 for a pretty reasonable reason: updates. Back then, updating games sucked. If a multiplayer game had bugs, players had to manually download patches from random websites. Some people wouldn't update it at all, which split multiplayer communities apart. Valve wanted a system that automatically updated games in the background. That idea alone wasn't terrible. The problem was how they introduced it. At first, Steam was buggy, slow, confusing, and honestly kinda broken. Servers crashed constantly, downloads failed, people got locked out of games they already owned. And remember, this was 2003 internet. Even connecting to Steam could feel painful. But Valve made one massive decision that changed everything forever. They tied Steam directly to Half-Life 2. Now this was a huge deal. Half-Life 2 was one of the most anticipated games ever. People were insanely excited for it. So they went out, bought physical copies, came home, installed the discs, and then got hit with something no one expected. A quote, "You must install Steam to play." People lost their minds, because to gamers at the time, this felt insane. Imagine buying a physical game at a store and still needing online activation just to access it. Today, that sounds normal. In 2004, it felt like madness, especially because many players barely had working internet. Some people literally could not activate the game they purchased. Others dealt with endless errors and crashing. Forums exploded with complaints. The players accused Valve of spying on users, forcing DRM onto gamers, destroying ownership, and trying to control PC gaming. And if you look at it from their perspective, they weren't completely wrong. Steam represented something bigger. It represented the death of traditional ownership. People were terrified that gaming companies wanted full control over games after purchase. And years later, a lot of those fears actually came true. But at the time, Steam wasn't some unstoppable giant. It was a mess. People forget this now because modern Steam works pretty well, but early Steam was rough. Really rough. The client consumed tons of resources. Friends lists barely worked. Downloads randomly stopped. Servers went offline constantly. There were even times players couldn't access single-player games because Steam servers were having issues. That made players furious because suddenly ownership felt temporary. And this is where Steam almost failed completely. Because if Half-Life 2 had flopped, there's a real chance Steam might not exist today. But Half-Life 2 was incredible. People loved the game so much that players reluctantly tolerated Steam just to keep playing. And that gave Valve time. Time to improve the platform. Time to slowly normalize digital gaming. And eventually, people started noticing some benefits. Automatic updates became genuinely useful. Instead of hunting for patches online, games updated automatically. Friends lists improved multiplayer, voice chat started becoming common, and slowly, very slowly, Steam became less annoying. But the real turning point came when Valve realized something huge. Steam couldn't survive as just a launcher for Valve games. It needed to become a store. That changed everything. Once third-party developers joined Steam, the platform exploded. Suddenly you could buy games instantly without leaving your house. No discs, no stores, no waiting. And this happened at the perfect possible moment. Internet speeds were improving rapidly. At the exact same time, physical PC gaming started declining. Retail stores began giving less shelf space to PC games. Developers were struggling with distribution costs. Steam solved all of that. For developers, digital distribution was cheaper. For players, it became more convenient. And before most people realized it, Steam had started changing gaming forever. But there was still one huge problem. Nobody fully trusted digital ownership yet. And honestly, people had a good reason not to. Think about it. If you bought a physical game, you physically own it. You could lend it to friends, resell it, keep it forever. But digital games were different. What if Steam shuts down? What if your account gets banned? What if servers disappear? What if Valve removes games? For many gamers, digital purchases felt temporary, almost fake. And this created one of the biggest debates in gaming history: convenience versus ownership. And over time, convenience won. Then Valve discovered something that changed Steam forever: sales. The Steam sales became legendary. And if you were gaming during the late 2000s or early 2010s, you know how crazy they were. Games would randomly go from $60 to $5 overnight. Entire franchises became cheaper than fast food meals. People started buying games they didn't even plan to play. Your Steam library became a collection. There were memes everywhere about people buying hundreds of games during sales and never touching them. And weirdly, those sales built loyalty. Because suddenly, Steam didn't feel greedy. It felt exciting. Players actually looked forward to spending money. That's rare. And while competitors struggled to catch up, Steam kept growing bigger and bigger. Then came another major moment: indie games. Before Steam, indie developers had a brutal time getting attention. Physical stores mostly focused on huge AAA publishers. Small developers barely had a chance. But then Steam opened the door. Suddenly, tiny teams could upload games digitally and reach millions of players. And this completely changed gaming. Games like Undertale, Stardew Valley, Terraria, Hollow Knight, come on, we got Hollow Knight here, became massive, partly because Steam gave indie creators visibility. Without Steam, modern indie gaming might have looked completely different. And this is where that public opinion fully shifted. Steam stopped being the annoying launcher. It became the center of PC gaming. But here's where things get really interesting, because in a weird way, Steam also became exactly what early critics feared. Think about modern gaming now. Physical PC games are nearly gone. Most people don't actually own copies of their games anymore. Everything is tied to accounts and launchers. And now every company wants its own platform. You have Epic Game Store, Battle.net, Ubisoft Connect, EA app. The exact future gamers worried about in 2004 kind of happened. Launchers took over gaming. The difference is that Steam ended up being way better than people expected, because Valve kept improving the platform while competitors often made it worse. Steam added cloud saves, achievements, refunds, mod support, community pages, workshop integration, family sharing, user reviews, and most importantly, Steam usually stayed convenient. And that's the reason people still defend it today. Not because gamers love launchers. People actually hate launchers. But compared to most alternatives, Steam feels less corporate, less restrictive, less annoying. Still, Steam hasn't avoided criticism completely. There are still arguments that Steam became too dominant. Some developers complained Valve takes too large of a revenue cut. Others worry PC gaming relies too heavily on one company. And honestly, there's truth to that. Steam is so massive now that it's difficult to compete against. Even giant companies struggle. And yet somehow, most players prefer Steam over almost every alternative, which is honestly kind of unbelievable considering how hated it was originally. What makes Steam's story so fascinating is that it could have gone completely different. If Valve handled those early years slightly worse, Steam might have become one of gaming's biggest disasters. Players almost rejected digital gaming entirely, and if that happened, modern PC gaming would probably look completely different today. Maybe physical games would still exist everywhere. Maybe launchers never became normal. Maybe digital ownership evolved slower, but instead, Steam survived long enough to change people's habits forever. And once convenience took over, there was no going back. Today, millions of people open Steam every single day without thinking twice. But back in 2003, a lot of gamers thought Steam represented the death of PC gaming. Instead, it became the platform that defined it. Thank you guys for watching this absolute banger I cooked up on the weekend, even though I said I have a life too, but who cares? I really liked how this turned out, but before we go to the bloopers, there's a couple people on my back I would like to give shout outs to. So, first we got my bro Achilles. I know his name is pronounced Achilles, but I didn't know it was pronounced that when I first met him, so I just always called him Achilles. Venus, again, because he's also in this clip, the recording that's in the background. And Mazzy, which is also one of my friends. But anyways, on to the bloopers, which just before we start the bloopers, holy stall, there's only one, but I guess from my editing software, it looked like it was a long clip, so hopefully it is, and enjoy. Even connecting to Steam could feel painful, but Valve made one massive decision that changed everything forever. They tied Steam directly to Half-Life 2. Now this was a huge deal. Half-Life deal? Oh